Hey everyone, welcome to the Trauma Cycle podcast, an exploration of mental health, trauma, and healing through the vehicle of music, stories, and faith. I'm Nick.
I'm Derek. Trauma Cycle is an album that I wrote and released to process the trauma that I experienced during my aggressive and gruesome treatments for stage 4 nasal cancer. By God's help, I beat the cancer and I'm working to beat the PTSD that followed. And in this podcast, we're going to be listening to the whole album, one song every episode, talking about the painful stories behind the songs, looking for common threads of suffering that we may all relate to, and trying to find the ways that God heals and may still want to heal. And I want everyone to know that you don't have to be trapped inside the trauma cycle.
Hey, if you're on YouTube, give us a like. That really helps out. And if you're listening on a podcast app, would you leave us a review? That would help us out a lot. Also, you can listen to Trauma Cycle by Derek North on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere you stream your music. Now, on today's episode, we are going to be listening to a song called Fade. Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about this song?
Fade is a song about grief and loss and grieving well. So my particular chemotherapy drug had a aggressive and known side effect in that it causes permanent hearing loss. And that was a devastating blow for me since my livelihood is to be a musician. It's what I do, both as my career and my pastime. I just love writing music and recording music and just doing music in all forms. And I remember I went in to the doctors before treatment to get a hearing test to find out where I was before the chemo treatment started. And I remember the audiologist looked at my numbers and went, "Oh, I'm sorry." That's the first thing she said to me when she saw my test results, because she said, "Your ears are really good for a guy who's 37. Basically, we're about to destroy them." And the chemotherapy just killed nerves for all of my high end. And now I wear hearing aids every day. And it's been a real challenge. And we'll talk more about the difficulties of relearning how to hear. But this song is about my anger and my grief and, you know, the feeling of injustice when something that you not only love, but is important to you and kind of part of your identity gets taken away from you and you just can't get it back.
All right, well, let's listen to Fade. Dang. Well, there's Fade. Whew.
It's the longest song on the album. Yeah.
That was a journey, man. There's an energy, there's a tone to your voice in that one is super clear and punchy and like right
Mm,
out in front, which
mm,
I really love. But then also the tone of all the other instruments has kind of this muted, like
mm,
kind of, and I think it really captures, the theme of the
mm,
song,
mm,
texture wise.
mm. Thanks. Yeah, I think there's a lot of um, intention given to making the sound of the song be disoriented,
Yeah.
disorienting. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
there's a lot of things that are not supposed to be super clear.
Yeah.
They're giving you this sense of a musical sense of maybe my hearing loss, the lack of clarity in the world, the frustration that
Yeah.
I feel, and so I try to capture that in a lot of the tones and the structure of the song, even that kind of stuff, not just the lyrics.
Yeah. Well, I know something on this listen through was how, there's a solo before each verse. And then, man, that solo towards the end is so ripping, bro. Like, it is so good. But it's
Thanks.
almost like it was like, um, I don't know if personification would be the right word, but it's almost like those solos and those guitar lines was like you're hearing kind of like trying to be heard, right? Like it was as it was going through the treatment,
Hmm.
like its energy was trying to be heard, and that solo was kind of its last, the climax, like the last
Hmm.
climax it had before it was lost. Um,
That's really interesting. I love, like I've mentioned before, I love hearing other people's interpretation of music. That's what makes it special, is the
yeah.
freedom in which we can internalize other people's music. I will say that the majority of the solos were done in that same idea of wanting it to be kind of confusing or not clear. So like the all the solos in the beginning of the song, the opening and after verse one, and even a little bit at the end, I did them with a wah pedal. If you don't know
Mm,
what a wah pedal is, it's a pedal that you step on, and it's got a little like lever that you operate with your foot, and it changes the EQ of your sound. And it, think of like Jimi Hendrix, wow, 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 kind of gives that wow, 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 wow sound.
yeah.
And I picked that because it also made me think of Charlie Brown's teacher in the old Peanuts cartoons when she's like womp 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 womp, and then Charlie
Yeah.
Brown's like yes yes, but you know, uh,
But we can't
and
hear
sometimes
what they're actually saying.
right, but you can't hear what she's saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so the wah pedal was like my little nod to Charlie Brown's
Mm,
teacher of things are womp womp womp. I have trouble hearing what people say to me on a daily basis now.
wow.
And then yeah, and then there's a solo after the second chorus, which is a reverse guitar solo,
Okay.
and that's played backwards, so it's disorienting. And that's when the song kind of gets into that halftime
Mm,
groove. So it's unexpected, and the solo is played backwards. So meaning I played a solo, and then in the computer you just reverse the file, and the computer will play it backwards, and it kind of gives that wow wow kind of a
wow.
sound,
Yeah.
um, because all the notes, instead of decaying in the normal way that you hear it, the decay comes up. It's not a decay, it's like a ramp up to every note, and it
Yeah.
sounds super odd. So again, that was to give a some sort of a nod to the difficulty that I have understanding the messages that people are trying to communicate with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, I've told you this offline, but this is one of the harder songs for me to listen to of because I know you. I know how much music was a part of your life, and you said identity earlier. And so as your best friend, it's hard because it's such a visceral song. And I think that's great. Your artistry came through, and specifically in the bridge. Sorry. Just telling, like inviting people in to your experience of like listen to it fade. Like I know it's
Hmm.
like you talking to yourself, like I'm listening to it fade, but like that grabs me so hard, and it just makes me like I'm still in denial about it. Like I haven't accepted it for you. Um, so
Wow.
it's a testament to how awesome the song is, bro, and how
Wow.
visceral it is. And I hate that cancer took that from you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you,
But it's
friend.
also freaking crazy that even with all this hearing loss, like look at what you have done with this album, bro.
Mm.
Like I'm sorry, everybody. This I'm gonna brag on my best friend for a minute. I freaking love
Can
this
I?
album. Sorry, this I love
Thanks.
this album. It's amazing.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'll just be in the other room for a little while so you're done. I'll come back. Come back later.
Come back.
He's still going.
He's still going. Hey, everybody. My name is Michael Scott, and for the next 3 hours, we're going to talk about the life of Derek North. Sorry, bad reference.
um, yes, inviting people into our pain is a necessary way for us to grieve well.
Mm,
Because we have to ourselves go back into our pain.
mm,
In order to grieve well, we have to re-enter the pain and let our heart process through it. We can do that with friends and family, counselors. We can do that through scripture and through prayer with God. There's all kinds of ways that we can process our grief healthily, but we can't do it apart from our pain.
yeah,
We talked about a couple episodes back when we listened to Mirror My Enemy, how we had to be committed to the truth of
yeah,
where we are in order to heal. And we have to be committed to the truth about what we've lost.
yeah,
In whatever traumatic experience you've had, something got lost.
yeah,
Innocence was taken from you. You're a veteran and you've lost some physical attribute, a limb or scars, or, I know several veterans who have permanent hearing damage as well.
mm,
Um, Maybe you are a widower and lost your spouse in a really traumatic and sudden way. Um, and we have to be committed to the truth about what we have lost in order to grieve well.
yeah,
And so I think I like what you're saying, Nick, because I wrote this song for me to enter my pain
yeah,
and deal with what for a while was an overwhelming loss for me.
yeah,
Because I was in treatment and I didn't know what was going to happen. And I thought, I'm losing this forever. Like my
yeah,
music career is over. And even at the time, my physical symptoms with the radiation and the chemo basically made me mute for a couple of months. And so I wasn't physically talking
mm,
and I couldn't hear. So I just thought, like, I'm never going to get any of this stuff back. I didn't think I'd ever sing or write or play again. And that was um, just a deep, sorrowful pit for me.
yeah,
So I'm writing out of my own pain. But then you're listening through this, Nick, and your perspective is you see it as inviting people into your own pain and
yeah,
how gracious it is to have a friend or a loved one step into
mm,
your pain and be there with you and understand what you're going through and sit with you in it and help
mm,
you process that grief.
yeah. Well, I mean, it grabs you, man. And so that's what I'm
Mm.
hoping for other people with this story, with these stories, with this song. And I don't think people will not be able to resonate with this stuff.
I hope so. I think that we've mentioned many times, I think at this point that that grief and pain and suffering, that's sadly the greatest sort of common thread. The touch point on everybody's life is the existence of pain and probably something that was unfairly taken from you that you loved.
Yeah.
And if I think through the lyrics in the song, the opening line says, "Where there are no birds, there is no song to sing."
Mm,
And when I started treatment, they told me you're going to lose your hearing. Uh, I didn't know how fast it was going to take. and I think I had gone through one treatment of what would essentially be 9 chemotherapy treatments. I was doing a daily walk with my wife. I was out of work already, and I was doing a daily walk for as long as I could walk before I was bedridden. And we were walking in the park, and my wife Trisha says, "Oh, listen to those birds sing. Aren't they lovely?"
Mm.
And I looked at her and I went, "What birds?" And then we just both stopped in our tracks and we went, "Oh, I'm like 4 weeks in, and I've already like the key like of a better part of a year, and I've already lost the ability to hear the birds." And that was such a sad moment. And so that moment, that lyric, where there's no birds, there's no song to sing, it's really, that's when a lot of hope dropped out of my heart
Yeah.
at that moment. Um, and it's when you lose hope, you lose your fighting spirit. So that was
Mhm.
a devastating moment so early on in the treatment, knowing that there's more loss to come and there's more to be grieved, but I didn't even know what at that point, what it was going to be.
Yeah. So, how much hearing loss do you like? Is it all across the board? Is it, I don't know,
That's a good question.
is it
It's
like a
all of the high,
percentage?
right, right. It's all like my high end and like the upper register. So it is the area where a lot of older people have hearing loss.
Mhm.
Older gentlemen, I think maybe a little bit more suffer from hearing loss. And a lot of times when you have age related hearing loss, there's a gradual curve.
Mhm.
It just sort of rounds off, and you totally lose the really high stuff, but everything else, there's kind of a grade to it. Mine, right at about 3.5K on the EQ chart, like it just, it's almost a straight line down.
Wow.
And so there's no curve, there's no, gradual reduction. It's just, it's like these nerves are dead, these nerves work.
Yeah.
Um, and when someone suffers normal age related hearing loss, it's this curve that happens over decades. A
Sure.
slow reduction, and your brain slowly gets used to it. And even use the phrase you commonly hear, the slow fade to gray, right?
Sure.
That would very much apply to
Mhm.
this song. The slow fade to gray. And mine, it was within a couple of weeks, a couple of months, those nerves were dead.
Yeah.
Um, and so my brain, I really believe my brain actually went into an injured mode
Mhm.
and didn't know how to hear anymore. And I went through a season where I had to relearn how to hear.
Mm.
Um, and I remember going to church before I'd actually started working again. I think it was my first Sunday just in attendance where I felt healthy enough. I didn't have my hearing aids yet. And I went and we sat down and the band was playing and there was music happening and I obviously wasn't a part of it. I had some wonderful, amazing, good friends and people, beloved people filling in, but I couldn't hear the music. And I don't know how to explain this. There was obviously things coming at me and coming into my ears, but I
Yeah.
couldn't understand it, if that makes any sense. I would look at the band and I could see the guy singing and playing guitar. I couldn't hear the guitar. I just sort of heard this noise, like maybe like white noise, like a cacophony, like an unintelligible sound. I look
Mm.
at the keyboard player. I can't hear the keyboard.
Yeah.
And this is what I do is
Yeah.
I listen for I can hear all the parts of every song, you know, and it just broke my heart.
Yeah.
I can't hear anymore. And then at some point, I don't even know why, I ended up sticking a finger in my ear and I plugged one ear, and all of a
Mm.
sudden, the guitar player popped out.
Hmm.
What? I pulled it out, I lose guitar player. Plug my other ear. Oh, I can hear the keyboard. Pull my finger out, can't hear the keyboard anymore. What's going on? In hindsight, I think my brain was overwhelmed with the injury, or with the injury, my brain was overwhelmed with the amount of information coming in, and it didn't
Sure.
know how to make sense of it. I
Wow.
thought, like, if you're used to looking at a, if you're used to looking at a picture with the whole 100% of the picture, and then you cut off, 25% of that picture, and you're left with 3/4 of it, you may not understand what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what maybe my brain was doing. It lost a huge chunk. It didn't know what to do, and now it was really confused.
Yeah.
And so over the years, I think my brain had to relearn how to hear. After it healed, it had to relearn how to make use of what I had left.
Yeah.
And my hearing struggles are still real, but they're not nearly as severe as they were when I was even writing the song and trying to capture the disorientation that I felt on a daily basis.
Okay. That's fascinating. And that's, the overwhelmed nature. I would say maybe the chorus kind of represents that. Like, it's just kind of this sonic bah. It's so intense. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is so, after the verse being dropped down so low to kind of just like a groove. And then it's like this cyclone of sound. But something else I'm interested in is like, how has that affected your music production? If you can't hear above a certain frequency, or is that what your hearing aids help with? Can you still access that with your hearing? How do you produce music in that range now that you've lost that range?
Yeah, so I cannot access that stuff anymore. Those nerve endings are dead.
Okay.
So they don't produce anything anymore. My hearing aids do help me utilize what I have left.
Okay.
And they're a blessing for all of their inconvenience, but they're not reactivating what's dead in my ears.
Okay.
But how does that affect my music production? Well, I feel blessed. I feel thankful that I have been doing music for a long time in my life, and I recorded my first thing, back in 1998, and I've been recording pretty steadily since then. Most of that is just unlistenable, and you will never hear it. But and I've been in bands, since high school, and so I know how things should sound.
Yep.
Even if I can't hear them. So, for instance, by itself, if I just have like a shaker, by itself, right here, I could totally hear it.
Yeah.
As soon as a band starts playing, or if I put it in a track, it's gone. A hi-hat, which is even a little bit of a deeper frequency than a shaker, dude, like by itself, I can totally hear it. In a mix, dude, all hi-hats, all cymbals, they're just gone. They're gone. It's just like, and so I just have to trust that, on the final end of a mix, like my good friend Brian Logue, shout out to Brian Logue at Prologue Studios. I just got to trust that he's doing a great job mixing all those overheads because I can't hear them, and I just have to remember that they're in there. So when I'm writing, I can write the parts and just have to remember that I got high-end stuff in there. And even though I can't feel the energy, I just have to trust the end result. And then I just kind of have to ignore the weirdness of sound. When I play the piano, and I'll go up in the register, and I'll get up to these higher keys, and I don't exactly know which key, but I'll hit a point where the sound almost disappears. And I think of it as like an egg or a balloon. Because every note has its like primary frequency, but there's also all of these kind of like sympathetic frequencies that vibrate. Every note kind of vibrates other notes around it. And so there's all of this extra material that gives a note a beautiful life to its own. But what happens is when you go up in the register, I get a point where the main frequency is so high that I've lost it, but I can still sort of hear all of these other resonating frequencies that may be a little bit lower. So it's a strange situation where the sound is hollow, and it's almost like an empty egg, like a plastic Easter egg that has nothing in it. It's like the shape of something, but there's nothing in it at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? And like the
so
violin
it's like
will have
almost
a
you
very
can hear what was there, but it's like an empty.
Right. And then you come back down the scale, and then bam, there's the note for real. Then there's the one that actually sounds like a real note.
Yeah.
And I'll have that same situation if I'm rehearsing with a violinist or with a flautist, and the flute player will go up high, and it's like, well,
That's
there it
gone.
goes. That's
Yeah.
just gone into the spot where, like, I don't know, you're doing something. It's like these faint, like, whispery things of where the notes used to be, and then they kind of come back into focus again. It's so strange.
Wow.
But then I've got recordings where I have put something into the recording that I can no longer hear.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I was listening back through another project that I had put out called Freshwater, and I was listening to one of the songs, and it had this really high synth part during the choruses. And I always liked that part. And I was listening back through it, and I was like, where'd it go? Where is it? I can't hear it. And then the realization of there is stuff that I've recorded that I just will never hear again.
Yeah.
And that made me really sad. That was a new layer of grief that I had to process. And I've made peace with that. And now as I've, putting out Trauma Cycle, well, I just know ahead of time that I'm never going to hear the hi-hats,
Yeah.
On this song, though, on Fade, in the groove after the second chorus, that halftime groove, I can hear the bell of the ride cymbal. If you listen for the bell, that bell pops out because a bell's got a little bit of a deeper tone on the bottom end of it, and that kind of cuts out. So I can't hear that. But I go into the project knowing I'm not going to hear anything but like kick, snare, and guitars, and I'm okay with it now. My favorite line probably in this whole album is connected to this idea of not being able to hear the stuff I've written anymore. And it's the end of verse 2 when it says, I can't hear the harmony of music I write for me. And that was referencing this song that I listened to, and I couldn't hear the synth track anymore. And then it says, empty and hollow is the sound of memory. And the empty and hollowness is sort of a reference to that hollow sound of the high piano and violin, but also the hollowness inside me without this stuff. And all I hear in my head is the memory, because I can't actually hear the sound anymore, but I can remember what it sounds like. And, for a long time, that left me with a really hollow feeling.
Wow, man. Well, way to process that. Way to process through the grief. And I mean, what would you say? We didn't talk about the ending. So the ending has that really interesting whole reverse moment. What does that signify or symbolize for you?
Yeah. So being committed to processing our grief as a way to continue exiting the trauma cycle is really important.
Okay.
Because our grief can be trauma triggers to us. So something that of deep loss to us, and the loss is so potent and the pain is so real and strong, it can throw your body into a triggered event where you had the physiological responses. Again, mine was the heat in my chest, my neck, the shaking, telling my body, telling my brain, this is a trauma trigger, and then I have to act in a healthy manner. So for me, dealing with this hearing loss would set me off. As the first verse says, living behind a mask, taking my ears to task. I was actually writing this during the pandemic. So like, I live by watching people's lips now. I don't look at your eyes anymore. I watch your lips. Otherwise, I can't understand what you're saying. So going for several years where people were behind masks, I was like, come on, I can't, this is killing me. And then the next line is, you think my mind is dwindling? That's sickening. And the idea there is that I would get so many people, tellers, baristas, I don't know, service people, whatever, I'm interacting, and I can't hear them, whether behind the mask. Remember like the plexiglass shield things for a while, or even just in general, I can't hear them. And I say, I'm sorry, repeat that. And they repeat it, and then they start talking to me like I'm stupid. I said, like, what are you dumb? Let me say this again. And so, like, I was so sad about the loss, and then I kept getting these emotional crashes
Yeah.
from people just treating me like I'm an idiot
Yeah.
and devaluing me. And I would just go home and I would start to feel the heat and the
Yeah.
shakes. And so this grief was triggering trauma. And I think that that could be the case for a lot of people,
Yeah.
you know, perhaps a widower who lost a spouse traumatically and very suddenly. The loss of that person whom you love so deeply brings the grief so strongly to bear that it could trigger, traumatic responses.
Yeah.
I think of veterans who may have been injured significantly, loss of limbs or loss of deep scarring, loss of all kinds of things. Perhaps a veteran lost a right arm and has to force to do everything with the left arm. How frustrating would that be to try to relearn everything? And the grief and loss could pull out trauma triggers. So being committed to dealing with the pain, grieving the pain, is so important to getting out of the trauma cycle. And that's what this song was. And so there was something where I wanted to find a specific moment to represent my hearing loss. And I know that there's sort of tenets or themes throughout the song or tones, but I wanted a moment. And yeah, we talked about the reverse guitar solo.
Mm-hmm.
That I ended up was sort of this happy accident at the end of the song, that weird little outro. And to me, that's the moment that really communicates how disoriented I feel in my daily life with people talking to me. And it totally happened by accident. I remember praying about wanting a moment in the song, but I didn't have one. And then the song was finished, and I was like, I don't have that moment. And I felt a little sad by it. So this is how that moment came to be, because at any moment is it, but this is how it came to be. So in order to write that reverse guitar solo, I cut out the drums, the bass guitar, and the rhythm electric guitar from that section in the song, and I moved it to the end of the song. I copied and pasted it to the end, and then I reversed those files. So now the drums, the bass, and the rhythm guitars are playing backwards. Then I played a regular solo over the top of it and recorded it and listened to that. And then I took everything and flip-flopped it. So then now the guitars, drums, and bass are all playing forwards, and my solo is backwards, and I got to listen and see if I liked it. Well, I don't like that, how that sounds. I don't like how that sounds. So I'd flip it all around again.
Yeah.
So now the solo is right, and I would correct it, and the drums and bass and guitars are backwards. And I would do that back and forth until I was satisfied. And once I was satisfied, I just grabbed the solo that I liked and put it in the real song, and I left these reversed, this like chunk of reversed guitar, drums, and bass at the end of the song.
Yeah.
I just left them there, and whatever, I'll delete it later, and I went back to work. So one day, I was listening to the song. It was mostly done. Sometimes I turn off the lights and just close my eyes and listening. And I got through that long guitar solo at the end, and there's a little bit of a fade. And then I had forgotten about all these weird reversed fragments at the end of the song, and it just sort of faded up and came back, and my head started spinning, and then I just started bawling.
Oh, man.
I started weeping because I knew in that moment that was like God giving me the moment that I'd asked for. This representation of my disorienting grief.
Yeah.
And then I just cried for a long time. And the solo that you hear over the top of that ending section, that's the same exact solo as a reverse solo. It's just played in reverse first, and then played,
Wow.
in regular backwards and forward, whatever, forwards and backwards in the ending section. So that's how I stumbled onto that, and I consider that a gift to my grief process. And I think what we can take away from that is entering back into the pain.
Yeah.
We can't deny our pain's existence. We can't deny our grief. We can't stuff it. We have to be committed to the truth that we have pain, and we have to process that pain and even have to understand and expect that pain to intersect with our trauma cycle, and how we can still exit out healthy by taking care of our body when we have those physiological responses.
Derek, thank you for sharing your stories and your music. Everybody, make sure you join us again for the next episode where we continue to listen through the trauma cycle and discuss its themes. And once again, you can listen to Trauma Cycle by Derek North. That's that guy. Wherever on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you stream your music.
Yeah, Nick, thanks so much, brother, for all your good help, and your company, Storycraft Productions, for doing what I can't do. Folks, be sure to check out Nick Casucci and Storycraft Productions on Instagram and YouTube.
Thanks, Derek. And thank you to everybody that joined us. Hey, before we go, if you know anyone that is hurting or could be helped by this music, go ahead and share it with them.
Remember, there's always hope. There's always healing. And you don't have to be trapped inside the trauma cycle.
Well, I'm trapped inside